Say 39.
Number 1.
39.
1.
38.
37.
36.
35.
34.
33.
32.
31.
30. 29.
28. 27.
26.
25.
24.
23.
22.
21.
20.
19.
18. 17. 16.
15.
14.
13.
12.
11.
10. 9. 8.
7.
6.
5.
4.
3.
2.
1. It's time for mouthwash. Giddy up.
Hi, and welcome to the Mouthwash Talk Show, a minty, fresh take on politics. And we have what I think is going to be a really good show tonight. We have George Middleton coming on, and we're going to talk about the nuclear family. I know you're probably talking, what is this, a family about a bomb, or what's going on with that? But no, you'll just have to stick around and find out. But first, I want to talk about, how the format's changed a little bit. If you didn't notice that we had a little bit of a different intro there. A little more generic, but that's because we're on Channel 40 now, and that is actually going to air in a couple weeks after this live show. So what we're going to do is we're going to do about a half-hour show, and then we're going to switch over, and this is where anyone that tunes in live is going to get a little benefit because, hey, you get to see the rest of the show live, and it's just pretty much going to be like we always have done, but we've had to make a few adjustments for the television portion. So our first broadcast will be last week's show on May 6th at 9:30 on Monday evening on Channel 40 WHMB. So that'll be fun. So I'm going to go ahead and bring on George, and let's see how George is doing. George, how are you doing this evening? Long time no see.
What's going on, John?
It's happening. You are going on tonight. I've looked forward to this because I know that you study people like I study people, and we always have interesting conversations.
Yes,
about
we do.
People. Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
Been studying for a while. So, George, give our viewers that may not know you a little bit of your background, and then we'll go from there.
All right, sounds good. I'm George Middleton. I am a mental health therapist. I'm a musician. And I'm also promoting a series of works addressing the connection between our mental health as a country and race ideology. That's because race is, as most people know, front and center, whether you like it or not, in almost every aspect of our lives. So my work right now is focused on helping society at large and individuals learn a more effective and proactive way of addressing issues associated with this, a significant systemic stressor.
Yeah, that sounded like a psychologist if I ever heard one. And that's what I like about you. You are willing to, chop it up. You're willing to break it down. You're not shy. You're not scared. You call it what it is. And that's why I'm excited to have you back on the show. And if anybody remembers George from, I think it's probably been 2 and something years when I used to do the Do Something Indie show. Yes. I actually did an interview with George, and it's just always fascinating, and the time goes by so quick, and I always never ask all my questions. But, now I have a panel of people that they can attack you with and ask questions.
You got some help.
And yeah, I got some help. I got, some people. So let's go ahead and bring those folks on here. But first, I'm going to go ahead and play a commercial here for this is one of our sponsors. See, this is the thing when you get be big time, George. You got to have these commercials and everything. So
Cooking with
Let's see
grease.
if I can cue that up here. This is actually a commercial that the Chateau de Marseille studio produced for the Angel Animal Hospital. So let's hear this commercial and then we'll come back. George will be on the hot seat. We'll bring the panel on and see how they're doing tonight. So here you go. Enjoy this 30-second commercial.
Hi, my name is Shelby. And I'm Annie. And we work together at Angel Animal Hospital in Greenwood, Indiana. It's a great place to work, and we are hiring veterinarians and veterinary technicians.
You can contact us at our website, which is myangelanimalhospital.com.
All right, all right. Well, there's George. I have to get the right person out here in the hot seat. I'm always dealing with that. And I get to be on the bottom there. Ed's on the let's see. Let's leave it right like it is. I want to be by Ed tonight. I'm sure he's probably, gonna need some help tonight on the show. And plus, if he gives me sass like he did last week, I can punch up at him or something, like that. But well, let's see how the panel's doing tonight. We'll start with our newest member of the panel, Jordan. He's taking the place of Tiffany while she's off campaigning for her big job in Fishers. So, Jordan, how are you doing this evening?
Doing well this evening. How are you guys doing?
Fine as frog hair split three ways. So, hey, that's good. Now, Lucy, how are you doing tonight? I see you got the red pill and the blue pill there. So what's is there something with that? Pharmaceutical now?
Gosh, yeah, I guess I'm the anti-big pharma girl. I'm actually hoping that everybody will do the red pill with me tonight. And they will make the conscious decision to see beyond the slave shackles that are holding them down, which is, we're all socioeconomic slaves in this country, and decide instead to leave the system, walk away. I just want you to walk away from it. Come out of Babylon.
Yeah. So Ed, we have a sponsor tonight that actually has that's looking for people to work with them. The Bimbo Bakery, easy for you to say. They're actually looking for a position up in South Bend. So we're going to put that on the air here a little bit later. And hey, maybe you could drive a bread truck. I don't know. Can you do that? You gotta. Hey, Ed, this is like live TV now. You got to unmute your microphone. Sorry. He's a little nervous.
By the time I got to where I was going, all the bread would be gone. So yes, it's not the job for me.
I think that would be a problem. That would be a problem. So, well, we have Mr. George Middleton on, and as you heard in the introduction there, that he's a smart guy, and he's gonna explain to us all about the nuclear family and what's going on with maybe some of the things that are causing that problem. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to start with Lucy tonight. Lucy, you don't have to wait till last tonight. You're going to be the first questioner on this subject tonight. So fire away. Fire when ready.
All right. Well, George, thank you so much for coming. So excited to be on the show with you tonight. The nuclear family, I'm trying to live that life. My husband and I have 10 kids and 3 grandkids, and, really made the commitment when we were younger that once the first baby came along, it was no longer about us. And so here we still are 3 decades later. What have you seen from society at large, government agencies, those sorts of things that have helped to destroy the nuclear family? What have been your observations?
What have I seen? Rephrase that. Restate that question one more time. I want to make sure.
Have you seen collusion or a concerted effort, or maybe just merely a pattern where nuclear families are not supported and may in fact be sabotaged by the very institutions that claim that they want to uphold the nuclear family?
I would say that destroy would not be the word that I would use to describe it. We are experiencing an identity crisis. What used to be the nuclear family, the traditional model, is evolving. And now keep in mind, I approach everything from a therapist perspective. And one of the aspects of effective therapy is we don't assign morality, judgment, right or wrong, blame, finger pointing. All we want to focus on is Is it working for you or is it working against you? And that's typically the easier way. And then once you get through that process, you can then go back and grab your morality model or your religious model or whatever other subjective ideological model you may want to live by and insert it over that effectiveness model. And 9 times out of 10, they align because you've done the objective analysis before you lay in your ideological perspectives. Okay. And so I would say that the nuclear family and many other institutions are experiencing an identity crisis.
Okay, now we do take questions from our audience, and Spiro Iraklianos has a point of order. Can we ground ourselves and define nuclear family? So I did put a teaser out there on the promo for this. It's like, hey, you want to find out what the nuclear family is? So I guess you might want to tell people what that's about. So give us your definition for that other question there. What the what?
What the what?
Got a little. Okay, go ahead.
The nuclear family is a subjective term. We're trying to make it a one size fits all, a standardized approach. So my interpretation is definitely going to be different than someone else's interpretation. However, in this country, philosophically speaking, it's supposed to be okay. Everybody gets to define what their nuclear family is for them.
Okay, and I'm going to say, Jordan, what is your definition of that different? I'm going to go down through the panel, and I might even chime in on this about what do you think a nuclear family is? I mean, is it it's sort of an odd term because it doesn't really it doesn't sound very warm and friendly at all.
No, it isn't a little bit so much about it being warm and friendly. I agree with George. It's relative. The great thing about America is we have the pursuit of happiness. So my definition of family nucleus may be different from yours, John, or from George. The most important thing is when we're looking at this, we have younger parents than normal than we had in the last 30 decades. We're seeing that what traditional ages people were having kids, we're starting to see now it's really a large sliding scale. So nowadays, a nuclear family is a grandparent, a single mom, and the kids. Or the family is supportive, the father's not there and the mom's there, or vice versa. The dad is there and the mom's not there. So really, we do need to make a blanket at one size fit all. But unfortunately, we do have some conservatives that may feel a little bit differently than that. But I would implore them as Republicans, let's keep an open mind and let's try to define that for all Americans and not just for some of us.
Okay, that's again, Lucy, do you have a different perspective on that? All right, you can say I agree. That's an answer.
No, you know what? I actually love the expansion of that because that's where we as a society are heading. And although, I came from a traditional nuclear family, mom and dad, it still had that twist of my dad having a first marriage. So I have a brother and sister, that we don't share the same mom. So I think it's really important to recognize all of that. We have homosexual couples that are having children. They're doing great jobs as parents. My daughter's a godmother to a little baby in that situation, and they're thriving. So, I think of 1950s nuclear family being the situation that I'm in. But that doesn't, my reality doesn't have to define anybody else's. We can all come together. And as, George says, you take that morality, piece and you put it over after objectively looking at it. I loved it when you talked about that, by the way. And we can still have a very moral, wonderful society without having to constrain it to, a Norman Rockwell picture.
Yeah. And Ed, what would you say about that? I mean, you have a younger family these days, and Lucy, you got a family that's old and young and everything in between. So, what's your point on this?
I don't know if I'd say I have a younger family. I know my kids are younger. I was 40 when when my daughter was born. So
yeah, your example doesn't count. Then you blew out. Yeah, your family doesn't start at 40. Come on.
But and I think it also touches that I grew up in a generation. My mom was 16 when she had me. She was the single mother, and My definitions vary because my family looks very different than the family that I grew up in. My kids don't know. I grew up knowing my great grandparents, my grandparents. So if you ask me like what family is, it's very different. I grew up within blocks of all those people. My kids grow up 2,000 miles away from their, all of those people and really don't know any of them. So I do think it changes over time. And I think it's very defined on who you are and who you grew up or where you're growing up at.
Yeah, and I do think it's like standardized testing. I'm not a big fan of that because I never was any good at it. I always had my own drum that I beat and would go here and there, and it was a struggle. So to try to force every family or every situation into one, round peg square hole, George, do you see that being an issue? And I think I sort of got a gist of that when your first opening statement, that it's a problem with trying to fit the mold. And now we have TikTok and Facebook, and we have the highlight reels of what everything's supposed to be, what you're supposed to look like, your body image, all that. Is that something that comes into the equation when you're counseling folks, or when you're giving some therapy out about, hey, it's okay to be this different. Your tradition may not be the same as family Y and X's traditions. Is that something that you run into? I know there's a question in there somewhere.
Yeah. You kind of asked several questions.
I do that
within that statement, but that's okay though. I would say initially to kind of get to the earlier part of your statement, what's driving the obstacles or inability to have a productive discussion on this is economically based. And so unfortunately what happens is we can't have a discussion in an objective format because it's usually been driven. By the time we're speaking about it, someone has already made it an agenda and is pushing it whatever direction. And again, I'm not blaming, criticizing, because everybody has the right to do what they have to do. But we, as the general society, we have to start being more critical and objective about what's coming at us, because we're in an economic environment. So no matter what we're talking about, 9 times out of 10, economics is driving it for the purpose of extracting you from your finances.
Yeah, and I think that part of that is, when I was a kid, we're very close in age. Our dads worked, but our mom stayed home. But as I got a little in my teens, it got different. But both parents started working, and to me, a nuclear family, if you were to go back to the 50s, you would say, oh, a nuclear family is the husband goes to work, the mom's a homemaker, your kids go to school, they do this, they do that, we go to church on Sunday. And today it's 24/7. We're on the move. People are going everywhere. We're definitely, our communication levels our availability is very high.
My question to you, John, is that's correct in your assessment of that. Do you believe that evolution was random, or or is it possible it was designed?
I think it's just, I'm going to go with your answer on the economics drives this. I think it's all about keeping up with the Joneses somewhat. I think it is somewhat described. And Lucy, I think you'll appreciate this. I think that, our work ethic, our government, they want to keep us working. They want to keep us paying those taxes because, if Lucy doesn't put in their taxes theft before the end of this show, it won't be a show. But I think a lot of that is what drives these things. And I guess, how do we get around that? How do we carve out the time and without going broke and paying our bills? And is there a magic bullet for that? Is there a...
You can't get around something that you're not aware of. You first have to be aware of it. And most of us are operating on an unconscious automatic pilot. And by the time it comes into our awareness, we're in a position of reaction. And when you're reacting, you're losing. When you're defending, you're losing. And so, I'm approaching it from my perspective, because the idea is not so much to change your thinking as much as to reawaken your thinking, so that you can be intentional about whatever your response is, that it aligns with your values. often we find ourselves making decisions that don't align with their values because we're in reaction to the situation. Now it's survival. And when you're when you're surviving, that's the number one rule. Everything else is secondary and tertiary.
So I think that would be good. So any of the panel want to jump in and have a expand on that, or have another question? Either way, I think it's a very interesting concept there.
I have a question, if that's all right.
Go ahead. It's okay, Jordan. That's your job.
Yeah,
You're supposed to have questions. I know you're new.
When you talk about design, I can't help but to lean towards a little bit of that. I think a little bit of race baiting has been a big factor in it on both sides of the house, a little bit more with the Democrat Party. Seeing that they essentially designed and built and manipulated the welfare state, and we're seeing that younger families are resorting to that, or that economic times are so hard, a young man has to decide between his freedom or taking care of his family. So I think when we're looking at populace of the family, I really do think that we're seeing it's very socialistic. It also has to do with maturity. A lot of these kids, unfortunately, want the responsibility of mating as adults, but they not know how to mentally or emotionally be there and to be responsible, be committed, because the only commitment they had to do was be in high school, show up to class. And let's be honest, some of the kids nowadays can't even do that, even when they were working from home. So have you seen any shift in that from Black excellence, from the Black community? Are they trying to cause this shift in a more personal level versus than just hopping on a mainstream ticket idea and thinking that that's going to fix the issue?
A mainstream ticket idea. So you're saying the race baiting is the mainstream ticket idea?
For so far in the past elections, every time you'll hear it, the Democratic Party will always do something where they're championing the single mom. They'll do something where they're talking about lifting up the Black family, but there's nothing that we actually see coming back to the communities. Here in Marion County, the Republican Party has done multitude of things to make they're inclusive and engage in the community, where the Democrats continuously sell the same thing. I mean, you go out to Hallville, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So there is an issue with the folks who are sending the message. The message itself, I think, is crystal clear. But it's the people who are going out there as an envoy of the message are clearly missing the mark with connecting with the community, making sure the community is receiving and understanding that, and using their resources that are available to them, not only when they think someone's attacking their freedom or that they don't understand why we're cutting spending in some places, simply because we need people to take care of themselves and be independent and less government.
Gotcha. Okay, so you packed a lot into your assessment there and with the question. So I'm going to try to break it down as best I can. The overall context that you framed this in is in race, and when you use the term race baiting, that's the overall context that will cloud one's assessment, pro or con. And so in my work, I call my work racial deconstruction, because race is a social construct, and in order to effectively deal with it, we have to deconstruct it from within our thinking process. So I equate terms like race baiting, white privilege, Black excellence, those type of terms. They are intended to make some rational sense, but if you understand what race actually is, it has no rational format to stand on. So when you're trying to make a point, that's why it's often hard to get people to see things the same way, because they're coming from a different racial perspective. And that's what race was designed to do, is not to get you to see the same thing the same way. And so I like to, I know you may not feel like it's answering your question specifically, but I need to set that context, because
no, it is.
When we understand that, we can make more intentional assessments about our politics, about our families, about our economics, when you can extract the race aspect out of it. So again, race baiting, white privilege, excellence has no color. excellence is excellence. Yeah.
How do we get that out of the community?
Education. So like I said, my process is called racial deconstruction, and it's a threefold process. Education, that's first. Not ideology, but education. Education is objective and factually based information. Now, once you have the information, you can then, as I said earlier, go back and put your ideologies over it, your moral frameworks over it. But at least you have the same, we're all operating on the same factual, objective base of information, and that's education. And most people, as it deals with race, are not educated. They're emotionalized about race, but they're not educated about race. And psychologically speaking, it is generally impossible for the human being to both think critically and be emotional at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, before you say anything, Lucy, I can see you up there. I've got to get our sponsor in here. So we're going to go ahead and do, this is a good break, because if I think any nuclear family would have somebody in their household that may be able to drive a truck or deliver some bread. And so let's put this up here right over George. How's that? This is Bimbo Bakeries, and they are hiring in Central India. And notice there, Ed, it says South Bend. You got a job there, $18 an hour. Come on, I know, but you would eat all the profits. And you got Sara Lee, Ballpark, Edmonds, Bimbo, all these stuff. And look at that Muncie, all over the place. So they are one of our sponsors this week, and I think they should have to give the panel all free samples. So I think that's a good idea. And I think Lucy even mentioned, hey, since they're sponsoring, I'm going to go take out some Bimbo Bakery stuff to the libertarians. So there you go. And now we're back to George. And we got all of our advertisements out. And I know that I caught a little slack on our People Over Politics page about having commercials at all. I said, hey, nothing in this world's free. If that's how it works. So we gotta pay the man on this stuff. So let's continue our conversation. And
I'd like to jump in, John.
Yeah, then jump right in. It's your turn.
So one of the questions I have here, because we talk about economics of it, and I know I'll use South Bend here as an example. Like when we're talking about the government contracts that go out, I think last time I checked, about 70 to 80% of our contracts go to non-minority contractors that've been around, and most of those don't even live within the area where, like, even close to South Bend. And so we're essentially taxing these people, pulling money out of these communities, giving it to people that don't live in these communities, do work in these communities, and we're not seeing any economic gain within this area. And so can you speak a little bit about that, how that has impact on those nuclear families within these communities?
Good question, Ed.
So speaking specifically to the set-asides for minority communities and how that's not really reaching the minority communities. Yes. Again, that is alludes to trying to make rational sense from an irrational construct. Minority communities. That is an emotionally loaded, subconsciously impacting label that we really need to raise our awareness of. What are we saying when we say minority community? One of my workbooks that I'm promoting is titled, Can You Be American and a Color Too? And it challenges you to question and think about the identities. What does it mean to be American? What does it mean to be a skin color? What does it mean to be a minority? So one of the questions that I would ask is, if we're all American, is there such a thing as a minority and majority?
That's a very good point. And now, where could somebody find this workbook? Is it
the workbook? All my racial deconstruction works are available on Amazon, and I do a lot of presentations and trainings and collaborations with organizations that are serving our community, because you'll find this type of irrational thought process within all of our systemic processes of service. So, my goal as a therapist is to work with leaders in education, work with leaders in finance, work with leaders in government, work with leaders in public safety, to start deconstructing this racial thinking from our thoughts, our policies, and our practices. Because as we were saying earlier, and John, you said it, I think, before we came on, the concept of a black family and a white family, that's irrational thinking. A family is a family. We all need and want and have the same similar desires. So what is the purpose of putting these skin color designations on very similar human basic needs? We're making our work harder. So, and just to get back to your question more specifically regarding set-asides, it's, again, everything's driven economically. Race is an economic tool. So once you understand the game, first of all, the white identity is empowered to do things that the black identity is not empowered to do. That's not a victimhood stance. It's just an objective assessment. So the white identity is designed to be the one who has the solutions. The black identity is designed to be the one to say, hey, here's a problem here. And so as a result, there's tension. Now, when it comes into an economic environment, you can play games with that. Okay, set aside. So what do I do if I want to make some money here? I can do things like maybe hire or put a black face in front, or I can play games with race and say that I'm a minority community and extract all that I need based on a racial set aside. And it happens all the time. I'm on the board of the Indy Black Chamber of Commerce. And unfortunately, that boards like that exist because the general, and I'm not disparaging anyone, so I hope no one takes me offensively here. But unfortunately, because the economic game is a racially based what am I trying to say? A racially based playing field, that the larger Chamber of Commerce really benefits the dominant majority, statistically speaking. So as a result, again, those who identify as black feel like we have to come up and create our own thing because we can't get in on the general mainstream thing.
Yeah.
So can I just ask just a question in there? So if I'm talking zip codes and let's go ahead and remove race from it. Let's say zip code 01 to 0 or to 15. If in that area we're taxing that area, we're spending money in that area, but none of the contractors are coming from that area, regardless of race. What happens to that area when we're just constantly sucking money out of it and sending it to some other neighborhood?
Well, if you actually remove race from that situation, then you won't have that dynamic. It's the fact that you have race involved in it, that you have those general zip codes that are falling vulnerable to those behaviors.
Yeah. And I think that Lucy, well, we lost Jordan there, but we got him back. It looks like. So Lucy, I know that how'd you get down there? Okay. Yeah, this is awesome. All right. I'm gonna have to do some fancy editing on that one because we lost some things there, but that's okay. We're going to get this down to 28 minutes and all that. Lucy, I think you had a question. Do you remember what it was?
No, but everything that George says is so intriguing. So George, I've thought about this a lot of, removing the racial component from a lot of things. Why do we have to describe somebody, based on the melanin content of their skin? I'm pretty challenged in that way. I have friends that are much darker, everybody in between. Why should that even come up in it? And how do we remove that identity? Because what you said about, somebody who's white has this identity belief that allows them to go and do certain things in life. Whereas if you're raised as a black person in this country, you automatically assume that you can't do these sorts of things. Like, so a really good one about women in in Hollywood, and how even when the Black woman, very strong, wisdom-filled character is supposed to be the center of the show, she's almost always, and I didn't recognize this. I was so glad to see this and see it called out in my own mind. She's almost always put in a position of maybe not subservience, but definitely a supporting role, even if she's the title character.
Mhm.
So how do we help each of us inside of our own identities, remove that so that, I'm not constrained by, not having, what mythologically strong Black women have. I don't see that in myself because I wasn't raised Black. So I don't think of myself in the terms that my very strong Black women friends do. So it's just really intriguing to think about what would happen if we changed the language and the vocabulary surrounding this and raised a generation of people that don't pay no mind to it.
Love it. I love what you're saying here. Again, at the risk of sounding redundant, the first step is you have to be aware of what racial identity is versus cultural identity. They're two different things and they serve two different purposes. And what most America does is we conflate racial identity as cultural identity when that is just not factually or statistically true. And as much as one might want to say, well, I'm Black and I'm as good as you and I am as empowered as you, statistically speaking, this is not opinion. It just ain't so. It just ain't so. And you can put that in any systemic environment of quality of life area you want to. You will look statistically and see that Black is always at the bottom, even in upper socioeconomic status. Black is always at the bottom. And so it's lip service to just say, well, I'm an equal Black. I'm Black and I'm equal to white. In race ideology, this is fact. Black is not equal to white, period. And the insanity is that we keep trying to make Black and white equal. You can't get there from here, and it will never happen. Not in race ideology.
I think that is very good. And we're going to end our broadcast for the TV, and then we're going to stay with us, viewers, and our live audience here. And I just want to end with a comment. And then, George, I'll give you a last word. I mean, that was really a pretty good last word right there. But my thing is, like, let's lose our labels. Why don't we just go by our names? Don't put something in front of that, like, I'm White John Schmitz, or something like that. But we do sort of I think we do it to ourselves sometimes on a lot of things. So, George, before we go off of the TV broadcast, I'm going to edit that part out, so don't worry. What is your hey, George, what does your letter stand for there by your name? I'm wondering.
Okay, I'll say that, but just to your last point, it's more than changing the word. You have to first address your belief system. Beliefs are more powerful than facts. Just changing words means nothing. You must be honest and self-reflective and deal with how you honestly believe. And for that, you have to learn to identify that racial thinking in your mind. As far as the acronym, I am a mental health counselor, that's MHC. And then I am also a certified sexual abuse youth clinician. So I work a lot with youth in maladaptive sexual behaviors and abuse.
Okay, that's tough work, and that's probably rewarding when you have some breakthroughs in that category. Yes. Well, we're going to end this part of the program right now, and we thank you for tuning in, and we will see you again next week, and we'll have the same panel on here with a different guest, and we'll chop it up and we'll try to solve the world's problems like we do every week here. So thanks for watching, and you can catch us now on the overtime. If you're watching live on Tuesday nights at 9:00, you can catch us on overtime. All right, that's over, everybody. Now let's get to it. The Channel 40 show is going to be maybe a little calmer, but I'm going to start this out with the question. I heard we had a Hallville in there before, and I live in Mars Hill, and I think you could probably there's a correlation. This is definitely a race-related correlation, especially back if you were in the 70s. A white person didn't go to Hallville and a black person didn't go to Mars Hill. That's just the way it is now. That is not true these days. But how is it tribalism? Is it just we are still I don't know. What's the move to get around this or to get away from it or to help with it? I know that we've talked about, changing our mindset, and I really appreciate the fact that we're talking about our belief system. And, I have a bias. I think anybody that's of a bias, when I see a person of another ethnicity, that's easy for me, ethnicity, whatever that word is. I just make up words.
Say that 3 times fast.
Yeah, there'll be a cuss word in the middle of it somewhere, but you automatically think, oh, that person. If you think of, I'm just going to throw out a very arbitrary. If you see a person from Turkey, they're a furniture salesman or something like that. Just something that people are known for culturally. I think we talk about food and different ethnics that food situations, and I think that goes back to the culture. So I think there's a question in there. So before you answer that, George, somebody on this panel fashion a question up out of all that jumbly things I just said. And Spiro is like, he's like this. You're getting lost. Help him find his way. And I'm sure I did not help with that gobbledygook I just said. So somebody put us back on the track. And I know Lucy wants to talk about the train derailment over in Ohio. So we can talk about that on this part. So maybe George has some ideas about that. But anyway, somebody help me. Somebody save me here. Throw me a line.
Well, if we're talking about Hawville and all that, those are, I grew up in Eagledale 1 and Eagledale 2. I went to Northwest High School, and, Hawville was one of those places that I didn't go because, quite frankly, we viewed it as lower class, dangerous white people. And so I wasn't driving through there. We knew the places not to go that were historically, Black neighborhoods that were, equally as dangerous, and you just didn't go that way. But the crazy thing is, the very first real estate investing deal I ever bought was I bought a little lot over at 19th and, it starts with an R. It's not Ritter. Anyway, I'll remember it here in a second. And then held that lot, got it for $100, sold it, 3 years later for a couple $1,000s. And that neighborhood now, because of gentrification, has had a couple of things happen. One, Rutger. So the problem there is that the people who live there, whose fathers and grandfathers built those homes, who had paid into the tax base of Indianapolis for literally generations, those homes were often razed and they were moved out in favor of higher value property, so that more tax value could come out of it. And Hawville is going through that same sort of thing right now. So what do we do about the problem of those who are socio and economically disadvantaged? And why are we, all of a sudden taking the property that has historically been in their families where they've tried to grow, that little bit of wealth to have a place for their grandchildren to live? And, the state comes along and puts together these loan programs that allow wealthier folks to come in and literally run them out. I'm super frustrated about that.
Indiana Avenue would be a perfect example of that. I mean, and Brightwood, and yeah, there's plenty of examples. So George, what's your thoughts on that?
So yeah, I love Lucy's story there. Systemic problems require systemic solutions. This is a systemic problem. And again, it's based on this irrational concept of identity by skin color. Just the mere change of the melanin content will change drastically up or down housing and property values based on nothing else but the belief system associated with the color of one's skin. Yeah, and we try to make rational sense and try to justify it and say, well, they do this and they do that. So this is lesser value and this is higher value based on nothing of any objective, factual, evidentiary truth.
Yeah, that's and I was, I grew up in Indianapolis, and our family was we were in white flight, and if you remember in the mid '60s, we had white flight. We lived at 38th and Drexel, and the neighborhood started looking a little different color, and out they went. I don't, we don't have. I mean, that was a smack in your face, right in front of your face, and right. I don't. It seems like these days we don't have it that.
It hasn't
it's just
changed.
not that bad, but
it hasn't
but
changed.
it hadn't really changed. It's just sort of camouflaged.
It
Is
looks
that right?
It looks different, but it hasn't changed.
Yeah. And
so the one thing I want to talk about, and I'll go back to those zip codes. My first, like Lucy, one of my very first deals in flipping a house. I was working with an investor from California. I said, "Hey, we've got this ridiculous auction. Like, you have to." I'll say it right now. It was going at auction for $10,000. I knew this house was going to sell for at least 130. We called around. She called me back, told me she wasn't going to do the deal because I think it was 7 or 8 different realtors said, "Don't bother. I'm not even going to go look at this place. It's in the wrong neighborhood." I told her to keep going until you find somebody. I said, I don't care if it takes you till you get 12. We ended up selling that house for 135. Mm-hmm. And the hard part is, and the lesson learned there is just saying that, it's not a problem, and not being able to get those investors and not being able to get that money into that zip code. The answer is we're making those neighborhoods poor, and I don't really know what the answer is. It's not enough just to say, hey, we can't think of it as a black neighborhood. To me, it's a zip code. If you want to figure it out as a zip code, but we still need to have an answer to how do we uplift this neighborhood.
Well, remember, this is a systemic problem. So even if you're a realtor, you don't have to be intentionally racist to have racist outcomes in the work that you do. And this is one of the cognitive dissonances many of us are having, because when we talk about issues of race, someone's looking for that big old bad racist boogeyman. That's not racism. Racism is in our DNA right now of the country. And it's unfortunate because it's really not in alignment with most Americans' values. And that's why when you try to have a discussion, this discussion usually becomes emotionally very quickly, because one person is either feeling victimized and the other person is feeling accused. And all people are trying to do is make a living. They just want to make a living, take care of their family, put something away for a rainy day. But I got to go through all this race stuff. I either got to be accused of it or I got to be discriminated against it. And that's how we miss it, because what happens is the ones who really are aware of the game are profiting the most.
Yeah. Well, we haven't even talked about redlining. And if anybody doesn't know what that is, that's where, say, a black person goes into the bank and they say, hey, we're not giving you a loan. And the white guy right behind them say, hey, how much you need? And, that's been something that's been practiced for quite a while.
I'd like to show how the systemic version of that, how government perpetuates the redlining. The way the government perpetuates the redlining, and I've been a mortgage broker here in Indiana since 1996, is in order to protect consumers, right? We're from the government. We're here to help you. So the government comes in and says there is an absolute dollar amount that you can't go over on a residential property. So if I'm going to move into the property and make it my primary home, my little homestead, then the government limits the amount of closing costs that I can pay as a percentage of that deal. What that does is it prevents me from helping families get into livable homes that are 25, 35, 45,000. And if anybody's listening to this in California or the East Coast, they're probably laughing like, can you? Yes, in Indiana, there are still places where you can get a livable home for under $50,000, but I can't do an FHA loan on it because by the time you add in all the closing costs, it exceeds the 8%. And literally, the company that I work for would have to go in the hole in order to make that happen. And even then, it's not allowed. So government, in an attempt to protect poor people, has actually shut them out from the bottom of the market.
Yeah, I say it's expensive to be poor. I mean, it really is. If you think about it, you shop at convenience stores, which charge you a lot of money. If you don't have a bank account, you have to pay money to get your check cashed. If you don't, you're probably a renter. That's
You
probably
know,
not. It's tough.
there's another thing to piggyback on that as well, John, because a lot of these banks are required by the FDA or by the Fed to invest in the communities around where they're at. And so when you're talking about like what Lucy's talking about, you're talking about neighborhoods where you have these $35,000, $45,000, $50,000 homes. These banks know if they put down roots in a neighborhood, they're going to have to actually invest there, and there isn't much money to be made on a $35,000, $45,000 loan. They'd rather go to the other communities, and so it becomes a problem that feeds itself.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think it's a little
Jordan.
bit.
I was going to say, get in here because
I wanted to hear what you guys said as the millennial in the group. I think it's all of it. I don't think that it's a lot worse than it was in the 80s. I think we actually, thanks to technology and video cameras, a lot of this stuff is being aired out now and it's actually being seen and being dealt with. The conversation is being had. So let's go ahead and settle that. Second, it's superficial conditioning. When you make movies that stereotypically make fun of a family or shows that a Black woman is aggressive and loud, these things get hard-grained into the kids at a young age. But talking about affordability, let me tell you, I have my own company and I'm trying to invest. And even with inflation, I still cannot buy a house. Even with a good credit score, it's so systemic that it doesn't even matter about culturally what race you are. It is a class issue. If you do not know how to be financially smart and savvy and financially independent, this capitalistic machine will eat you alive because you don't have the tools, like some families that are generational wealth, or some families that even some of them got an education or a high school degree. It wasn't enough to keep up with the inflational cost of the area they live in. So you have a lot of these communities that were industrially powerful back in the day, that these communities were the up and up and homes were affordable, but now the businesses have killed the area. So really buying a home in there, the bank's not going to give the person going for the home a credit line because the credit's not good because of one or two or three things on the credit, or they have to make so much more money to be able to put down a down payment on that loan for the home that they'll basically get burnt out even trying to do it. So I really think if we're going to kind of fix this system, we need to educate the community on what being financially responsible looks like, break the generational chains that are on them about staying in poverty or moving out of the area that is not financially giving you the pursuit of happiness that is better for your family in the long run. It may hurt how cities allocate funds, but you know what? It'll make and hold the lawmakers accountable, saying, hey, you got to allocate it. Look, we don't care about you guys building a new residential development. The people in the community can't afford it. Why don't you guys give us an educational class on how to do your taxes correctly? Or how much can you itemize off your taxes if the kids are in school? That may be more helpful.
Can I jump in here?
Here comes Lucy.
So I agree with what you're saying philosophically. However, there's a saying that I go by. Everything isn't always about race, but race is in everything. And race is not the only problem, but is a significant part of the problem. So you're introducing the concept that class can be part of the issue. The problem is most people can't delineate race from class.
Right.
But
you can't. Most people can't even define what class is and what race is. You ask 10 people, what is the definition of race, and you're going to get 10 different answers. So I'm saying on a collective level, the country is not working on the same standard operational definition. And in terms of the big picture of what you're saying, it's not like what you're saying is the first time anybody's ever said that. The problem is we are living the definition of insanity. We keep saying these things. It's not that it's rocket science. It's really not rocket science. But the question we should really be focusing on is why in 2023 are we still having these same type of problems and these same conversations? And that is because, and this is my premise, we haven't learned to become educated about the racial aspect of all of our systemic interactions, systemic and economic interactions. And to try to go, again, I agree with what you're saying philosophically, but not to the point of saying, well, it's not really a race issue. It's more this stuff. It's a race issue. And the minute one has to say it's not a race issue, that's a key indicator that it usually is.
Well,
And to be able to be, we want to be educated so that we can actually know, objectively speaking, that it's no longer a racial issue. And most of us cannot do that.
I think it is a race issue, but I believe that if we're going to follow the chain, then let's follow it all the way down. Yes, it's
Agreed.
a race issue. It's a race issue internally and externally, as in other races are going to have an opinion or a stereotypical belief of another class of human. That's exactly how they're going to view it. They're automatically going to be like, well, if I'm Samoan, my family, we culturally do X, Y, and Z. Or if I'm Black, our family does this, that, and the other. You're going to have those different classes and different prides. We don't want to stymie people away from having pride in that and knowing their heritage. However, as an American, that is our number one culture. The Americana is our number one culture.
Well, right there, again, I need to redirect that. I mean, not that what you're saying is not true, but that's not the problem. The people, the term tribalism is not the same, is not synonymous with racism. What cultures do to interactively and economically support each other, that is not a negative thing. But all cultures, and you'll see this because of the history of race, all cultures racially discriminate against each other based on skin tone.
Yep.
All
Even
cultures,
in India.
exactly. All cultures do that. So we have to start becoming really nuanced and educated about this process. Just because you want to support your own community doesn't make you racist. But if you're making decisions based on someone based on their skin tone, that's racist.
That does.
And again, I'm not judging people. I'm just giving you, this is how the country has been ingrained, and we all do it. So let's stop trying to dismiss it. Go ahead.
So would you agree then with the nuclear family? Would you agree that if we're going to tackle the nuclear family issue, then we would need to do what? Do we look at this individually, culturally, and go to each cultural community and meet them where they are and see what issues are alike with a family that may live in Carmel? Do they have anything that are in common that we can tie a common thread? Otherwise, I agree with you. I agree with your point. However, instead of looking at it linearly, I'm looking at it panoramically. I'm looking at all sides of it. I really don't know which area would be best to work on.
I love the question.
It seems that it's a part of the nucleus of it.
I love the question, and that's the whole purpose of my work, is to start asking better questions, just like that one you just asked, because now it starts taking us in a more productive direction. But if we don't start questioning how we're using race and how race is involved, we're not going to get to those questions. We're going to stop short and keep perpetuating the same stuff. So yeah, the question you just asked, that is worthy of further exploration and merit. But it only has to be accompanied with becoming more educated and more aware of how race is involved in this process.
Yeah, and it seems like, here we are an hour into this show, and I feel like we're just now starting to, dig into it. And, I think one of the problems that I feel that we have is I'm afraid to say the wrong thing to somebody. I feel uncomfortable. What would you tell somebody who's maybe watching this show says, I don't even really speak to Black people. I don't really speak to Hispanic people. I just don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to say the wrong thing. How would you navigate that? How would you,
I love it. So I equate race to a bad marriage.
There's a whole nother show coming up.
I equate race to a bad marriage, one that can never be repaired. And the thing about, if you're going to a therapist as a married couple, you want your therapist to be objective. You want to make sure that he's looking at both sides of the coin without taking sides. And in race, there's no objectivity. That's what's going on with a lot of our diversity, equity, inclusion trainings, is someone's taking the white perspective and someone's taking the Black perspective. There's no in between. There's no objectivity. There's a piece of advice that is old school advice. Attack the problem, not the person. And usually in a married situation, it's usually not the husband or the wife. It's the stressor that's causing them to argue. So when you can focus on that stressor and stop pointing fingers at each other, you can attack it more objectively. In race, there's no room for that objectivity. The only way that you're going to get that objectivity is to extract yourself from race-based thinking. So as a result, if you identify as white, you're going to be more vulnerable to being uncomfortable about saying anything because you just don't want to offend.
Yep.
If you identify as black, you're going to be more vulnerable to being easily offended by anything that's said. And again, no judgment here. It's just how the identity works. Here's the bottom line, guys, and I'm getting ahead of myself in my deconstruction process here. There is no such thing as black people and white people. That's made up crap. And so if you accept racial identity, try as you may, try as you might, you're going to be vulnerable to one of those proclivities based on which skin color you go. If you're going to be white, then you're going to be associated with white privilege. You're going to be associated with superiority, supremacy, oppressor. You're going to be, no matter how Christian you try to be, no matter some of my best friends are, no matter what you do, that white identity is going to precede you in almost 99% of all of your environments. Same way if you identify as black, you can be culturally and educationally suit and tie down and all of that. But if people perceive you as black, you always have that extra little something you have to prove. You got to first, show people, hey, well, I'm one of the good ones, or, I'm not like them. You got to go through those mental gymnastics. That's what race is designed to do. But there's no such thing as black people. There's no such thing as white people. I know it sounds crazy, but it's really illogical to make your identity, the essence of who you are, based on a part of your body.
I love that, George. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. We're just colorless souls, and we're having an experience in a body.
If you're familiar with Samuel Adams, he's a black comedian, and he comes out with the color wheel. If you get the color wheel of all the paint colors, he said, I'm magic apricot, and he says chocolate thunder, and all these creative names of the paint colors, and it's like, really. If you think you can look at ours, I mean, Lucy's, she's glowing white. Ed is, a little browner, and I'm a little redder, and Jordan, he's chocolate. So I mean, George, so I mean, what is the color? But I think it is our perception of what we see behind that color. When we see that color, we think of, oh, this person's like that.
We've been.
It's very interesting. It's really interesting as human beings, being on planet Earth, Homo sapien has the ability to be sentient. We have the ability to dream, make music, do all these great things. And the number one thing on this blue rock that we spend most of our time doing is isolation, drawing lines in the sand, and worried about the complexion because of where someone originated from on some point on this earth. I think if aliens were ever watching us, they would laugh at this. This is probably what's keeping us from being just a civilization one, is this singular issue right here that we're not one people, we're multiple people with all of these different facets of what we identify human beings as, versus I'm Homo first and foremost, and I'm for the human race first and foremost.
I've got something to read, if you'll all will indulge me. I subscribe to something called the Dollar Vigilante, which is all about understanding the economic system as it actually is and not what we're taught about. And in this month's issue, it focused on a small part on public schooling. And I think public schooling probably does more to divide, the compulsory education that then forms the culture the way that it wants to be formed. I mean, what did Hitler say? I don't need you. I got your kids. You won't even matter. So very briefly from their current newsletter, this is again, John Taylor Gatto. He wrote, I'll get to it in here in a second. The differentiating function. Once their social role has been diagnosed, Children are to be sorted by role and trained only so far as their destination in the social machine merits and not one step further. So much for making kids their personal best. The selective function. This refers not to human choice at all, but to Darwin's theory of natural selection as applied to what he calls the favored races. In short, the idea is to help things along by consciously attempting to improve the breeding stock. Schools are meant to tag the unfit with poor grades, remedial placement, and other punishments clearly enough that their peers will accept them as inferior and effectively bar them from the reproductive sweepstakes. That's what all those little humiliations from first grade onward were intended to do. Wash the dirt down the drain. The societal system implied by these rules will require an elite group of caretakers. To that end, a small fraction of kids will quietly be taught how to manage this continuing project, how to watch over and control a population deliberately dumbed down and declawed in order that government might proceed unchallenged and corporations might never want for obedient labor. If this does not clearly show the difference between the enculturization, and I went to public schools, that we receive, and the disempowerment and the division. Like, they do not want us coming together to have a discussion about why we shouldn't even mention the color of each other's skins. But then, a certain percentage of these are going to different schools that teach them different tactics and strategies that prepare them to be our caretakers because we are so dumbed down.
What is the title of that book again? I've got to get that.
It is John Taylor Gatto, and he was named New York City the Teacher of the Year in 89, 90, 91. His books are Dumbing Us Down, The Hidden Curriculum of Compulsory Schooling. He also wrote The Underground History of American Education, and this is the one I was trying to remember, Weapons of Mass Instructions. How incisive of a title is that? Weapons of Mass Instructions. Oh yeah, if you have, children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews that you love, once you read his books, you will figure out how to homeschool those kids, how to create a family co-op or co-op with some other people, and get them out of the very system that's oppressing them.
And if you're Lucy, you can raise your own army. You can have enough kids
I
to
have
have
10
an army.
kids, George,
as you were talking about that, we're better together. My friend Ken Johnson, where he talk about better together, and I would say George knows Ken, and
I sure do.
You two guys are guys that are open and honest about talking about race relations, and whenever I talk to you guys, it seems like we talk about that, and that's good because we're comfortable talking about that, and I think it goes back to some people aren't comfortable with that. But if we realize we're all in this thing together, just like Lucy said, we have an industrial complex here that wants us to all be working for them. They want us paying interest. They want us playing the game. I think once we all realize that, but they're busy having us fight together. They love it. They love it when we're fighting each other because, hey, we're not thinking about what they're doing to us. So now I'm starting to sound a little like Lucy. Lucy, you're rubbing off on me a little bit, So I think we're getting close to the end here of the show.
Just to connect a couple of things. You're
going to get that last word.
What Jordan said and what Lucy said, they're really connected, because Jordan's assessment that we're on this big, beautiful planet, spending so much time inordinately on something like this. It's part of the human conditioning, and it's been refined to Lucy's observation of the reading. So it's a finely tuned science now, and we need, as the general public, to stop being in this bad marriage and step outside of it and attack the problem. And we have to start thinking that way. And until we can disassociate ourselves from racial thinking, we will unintentionally be perpetuating the problem. So it really requires us now, the fellow man, the common man, the people whom that book was written to control and manipulate. It's time for us to start thinking, disassociating, and reframing so that we can be effective. Not right, not moral, but effective.
Yep. Well said. Well said. That's a great comment. I just have one thing that I forgot to do, and we do a poll on People Over Politics. And if you want to join that group, you can take our polls. And so, in honor of George being here, we did a poll about the nuclear family. So I'm going to go ahead and put that up. We can talk over it. It's not. Do you think there is a breakdown of the nuclear family? I say nuclear, and my wife was giving me a hard time. I'm saying it right. But anybody that's watched this show for very long knows that I make up words. So we had 35 people vote on this, and it looks like pretty much that's a pretty big number there for the people that think there is a breakdown of it. And but then depends on your definition. So if we're talking about the 1950s to now, yeah, I would say that's it. But I don't think that we can classify a nuclear family. I would say would be traditions that they have made together, and that they are sticking together, and they are a nuclear, like that closeness. And I think that can look like a lot of different things these days.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody have any last comments? Oh, George, I don't know if I warned you about the conspiracy theory that we have.
Which is
yeah, you're going to find out. You can opt out now, or you can stick around. You don't have to have a conspiracy or anything,
okay.
But
all right.
This is where we get together. And actually, Lucy, you'll be proud of me. My conspiracy theory is got Bill Gates in it tonight. So that's good. So what I do is, this is sort of the ending of our show. You did an excellent last word there. Okay. But it's sort of a silly thing because we try to keep our topics light. We respect everyone's opinion. We honor those opinions, and we try to learn from those opinions. But every once in a while, we like that little fun. So the conspiracy theory is, well, I guess you'll just have to stick around and find out. I'm not going to give you the option this tonight. You're just going to stick around, but you won't be on the hot seat anymore. So that's the good news. So here you go. Here's a preview for it. And this allows people to get their tinfoil hats on. So here you go. Hey, y'all, better get your tinfoil hats out. It's time for the conspiracy theory. Come on now, let's go. Yeah, so that any notion of this being a serious show anymore is gone. It's done. And it looks like you got a new flavor of gum tonight. And Jordan, you're still come on, man. You've had a week to get a tinfoil hat together.
Oh my gosh.
And we're just like to get the link to Jordan for this. So, and Lucy, as usual, you have sort of the army hat on there for your army of 11
I just
people.
copied the brilliance of your colander idea, but I stole my own colander for this. I didn't have to steal my wife's since I don't have one of those. I need one though.
But I just realized your family is a football team. You have a whole football team of just your
or two basketball teams that can play against each other. Yep.
There's only 5 on a basketball team. You got even a sub.
Yeah,
so
I got
5 and
that's
5
true.
Is 10. Are you teaching? Are you homeschooling? I hope you're not homeschooling math.
Yes. With Khan Academy.
Awesome.
See, the free market provides amazing solutions like the Khan Academy.
Love it.
How many people are on a soccer team? Is that 11? Does anybody know?
Yes,
yeah,
I believe
11.
So.
I think that's 11. I don't. That's a different kind of football.
I don't know. Is that before or after their COVID-induced myocardial infarction?
Oh dear. Here we go. That's probably.
Here we go.
But,
we got the right hat on.
We can look at this like, football is like racism of football and American football and the world football. You could look at it like that. It's like, oh, there's people that like that kind of football, and there's other people over here like that kind of football. I mean, we could break this down to a lot of different things. So anyway, Ed, you got a conspiracy tonight? I mean, there's a lot. Oh, wait, I do have some breaking news. This is out of Chicago, just breaking news. This is not conspiracy. This is true fact. Lori Lightfoot has lost her rebid for mayor. Hey, Lucy, don't be showing. Oh,
you should address her by her proper name, which is Beetlejuice.
Oh, please. I that is funny, but she just lost. So let's give her a moment.
Did you see her before and after she really got heavily involved in politics? Like, I think this is like satanic and big, God versus Satan or whatever. But she looks rode hard and put away wet and then set on the dehydration mummification mode.
Look at some of those. Look at the presidential pictures from before and after. I mean, even you look at them. George Bush got a bunch of gray hair. Me and Barack Obama are about a month apart in age, and now he's got that much gray hair. So it's hard on you. There's a lot of responsibility, and you don't see me making a whole lot of fun of presidents, or I make fun of some people, but I'm like, I know that's a tough job. So anyway, that's our breaking news. We like to break the news out here on our show on occasion. Ed, what do you got for me tonight?
So I would love to, and with our show, Coach Prime gave me a great example to run with today. Coach Prime came out. Anybody knows new head coach Deion Sanders, University of Colorado. He was describing his recruiting, habits and what he likes to. He said he likes getting defensive linemen that are hungry, guys that are with single moms that they're trying to save mama, and he wants his quarterback to be from a two-parent household, leader of men that was raised right. And what Deion forgot to tell everybody is that his own son was his quarterback, and his own son came up in a single-family home that went through all kinds of divorce drama. So I just wanted to give a shout out to nepotism and say, who's next?
It's not the color of the skin; it's what family you're in. Is that what you're trying to say? All right. Well, hey, that's a good one. I like how you tied it into the show. Jordan, if you have you got no tinfoil hat? You got a conspiracy or anything you got to go out there?
Yeah, I got a conspiracy theory.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about this train derailment in Ohio. The fact that they're moving all that waste here, some of it here. My conspiracy is, what on earth did they promise Holcomb to allow that to ever come into our state, to be put anywhere near our soil, seeing that we have a lot of farmland and a lot of stuff likes to spill off into the aquifer. I don't know. I have a feeling here, hashtag, we're either going to see fracking next, maybe.
Or something. Well, I think it should be hashtag Indiana dumpster. So is what I'm thinking there. But we had some controversy years back. I think when Richard Lugar, when they had some chemical weapons that we had to get rid of, mustard gas or something like that. And I'm just thinking, why don't you just put a little ketchup with that mustard and it evens it all out? But apparently that doesn't work. So a lot of people were really up in arms about that. But I think that's a lot of that stuff went from, I think, Crane Naval Base. They have some places to get rid of things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's I'm not even going to say it. Well, it's conspiracy theory. This is an extra conspiracy here. They are actually going to send all this nuclear waste to Pete Buttigieg's house. They're not nuclear waste, this chloride stuff. They're going to send it to his house because hey, there you go. He knows what to do with it. So there you go. That's my extra conspiracy. I don't think they're going to do that. Lucy, go ahead. Save me here. Save me.
Well, gosh, this is my favorite part of the show. So my husband, Doran, corrected in the background that it was VX gas, not mustard gas. But my family is very familiar with the effects of mustard gas because my paternal grandfather, who served in World War I, had one leg that really got affected by mustard gas. So his leg was actually the size of his arm. So it was very shriveled up and, caused him a lot of problems throughout his life. So I'm familiar with, governments poisoning us and, doing terrible things. It's affected my family. There is a meeting in Putnam County tomorrow night at 7 p.m. It is at the Russellville Community Center tomorrow. Right now, people in Putnam County, and of course, everyone in Indiana should be, if they can, getting to Putnam County at the Russellville Community Center tomorrow at 7 so that they can really think about organizing. Eric Holcomb's just terrible Facebook post was basically, yeah, I heard this was happening in my state. So then I told him it couldn't happen, but then I heard some third parties were doing it anyway. So then I just, I called up our EPA person here in the state and told him I wanted to have a chat. And I'm like, you're so freaking weak. You're like the father or the grandfather of the family who is charged with protecting all of the children. You should be the first one shutting down the borders of Indiana to keep this crap from coming in and forcing Norfolk Southern and the federal government to actually deal with it. By the way, the remediation, Paul Stamets, Stamets, he's a fungus scientist. He's a mushroom guy. He said that there are mushrooms such as the turkey tail and the oyster mushroom that can remediate dioxins. So it could be possible to literally seed the earth with the spores, and the mycelium will go out there and actually break down the dioxins. But that's not my conspiracy theory. My conspiracy theory is public education, because none of this is conspiracy. This is all just contemporary.
Okay, those are well, yours is always conspiracy fact anyway. So
it is conspiracy fact, and it started actually before Bill Gates and his family's involvement with trying to destroy all Black people and other unfit people too. I wear glasses, so I would have been one whose lineage they would have wanted to thwart, since I would have been seen as unfit since I wore glasses.
Yeah, but you produce so many babies. I mean, that makes up for it, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I like to think there's quality over or quantity, but we won't know till their parents themselves.
Yeah.
So why did we have this public compulsory education system starting back in the 1800s? Why were parents put in jail in Massachusetts? Why did they fight it so hard in the 1800s? We had kids were being educated. We had scientists coming out who were discovering, electricity and steam engines and, the most wonderful inventions in the world. And they weren't publicly schooled. They were literally homeschooled or one-room schoolhouse schooled. So why did we need that? Well, it all goes back to the Prussians. You see, the Prussians had this that's a country over near Germany, by the way. They had this great system of turning out, little bots, clones, people that were obedient and compliant. And if you look at the curriculum that was created for Andrew Carnegie and some of the other industrialists, just about the time Bill Gates' dad was being born and starting all this, all of that was created. And as George had said earlier, this is technology. This is stuff that continues today. This is human psychology in action. How do you take someone that is free-spirited and young and chasing butterflies and get them to become reflexively obedient to authority? How do you get them to accept the authority of a costume, so that when someone comes in and they're dressed a certain way, you just accept the fact, especially if your skin is darker, that you're now in a situation where you could die if your behavior is anything off of normal, and even if it is, Philandro, then you get killed. The white lab coat comes in, the stethoscope comes in, and all of a sudden you're willing to be injected with something that you have no idea about, that's already demonstrably harmed hundreds of thousands of people. This is the conspiracy fact. This is the tragedy, is how people around the world, not just Americans, are conditioned to be reflexively obedient to authoritarian statist government whose only legacy is death and destruction. I'm looking at you, Stalin and Mao and Lenin and Hitler.
Those guys were
Pol Pot.
Professionals.
I left anybody out.
And Putin, yeah, you left out Putin. Don't forget him.
Well, we haven't had a chance to see all that he's going to do yet. But we do know that Zelensky was installed because our government went in there and took out their democratically elected. And then, of course, what was Putin trying to do? Well, obviously take back landmass that is the food basket of the world, other than the Midwest, which is now killed, thanks East Palestine.
Yeah, that's a very good segue to my conspiracy fact. And I was going to say,
you got one.
I got one, and it's actually conspiracy fact. So, your buddy Bill Gates, you mentioned him there. Yeah. Well, he's secretly or quietly going around and buying up farm ground. He's bought 270,000 acres, but don't despair, because we still have like 900 million acres of farm ground still left. But he's quietly bought that many acres. Now, tell me what you would need that much acreage for. There's something up on this. It's like, what do we got going on there? And, you talk about being, conditioned. Think about it. Our grandparents, they did cod liver oil, and they used to complain about how awful it tasted, but it was good for you. And I know that maybe you remember methylate or mercurochrome, which was the stuff you put on your cut. It burns. Mother, blow on it. It burns. Oh, but it helps you. We have chemotherapy. Darn near kills you, but guess what? It's helping you. So now we're conditioned to know that stuff's going to hurt you before it's going to help you. So there you go. That's my psychology of burning medicine and tasting bad medicine. And it's supposed to taste bad. So there you go. So anyway, that's my conspiracy facts with a twist. I did all that psychology thing for George since he's on the air. Now, George, we don't want to leave you out. After what you just heard,
Very
Are you
interesting.
able to give us a conspiracy theory or fact? Or
Very
I know
interesting.
Tiffany sometimes gives us a makeup tip. I mean, could you give us a tip on how to make, Ed could use a tip on the beard. I mean, you're killing him on the beard. I'm sorry, I got to say it. Your beard is so much.
Oh, you sweet talker, you.
Yeah, I know. Well,
And,
look at him up there. Look at that up there.
Ed's a man's man, so no, there's nothing wrong with Ed's beard at all. He's good.
Well,
he's good to go.
Fine.
He's good to go. But I do have I'm gonna just make the word up, a conspiracy question.
The first.
Why the sudden mainstreaming of the term UFO?
Project Bluebeam.
I'm going to
Your
take this
answer.
one.
Go ahead, Jordan.
All right. It's called Project Blue Book. Okay. So these unidentified UFOs aren't really what we would consider aliens. They are probably most likely some expensive guy's toys playing around with world governments, because it doesn't just happen here. But that's also another way for the government to lie to us and be like, don't look at the weather balloon over here we just shot up. Hey, this could be aliens. I mean, that's all it is. Project Blue Book. Look it up, folks. If you want to know anything about UFOs, Project Blue Book, the United States government.
I'd like to add, there is not only a Project Blue Book, which didn't they make that into a movie?
Yes,
or something? Okay, so people can watch the movie, but there's also something known as Project Blue Beam, which I think they're using for UFOs. But I've told all of my friends who are Christians, you've got to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove and all that kind of stuff. But the problem is most of them are just so darn naive, and they've been through that same reflexive obedience. I mean, for goodness sakes, I could go on and on about my friends that are Christian, but here's the bottom line. The bottom line is that there is technology, and you can see this through the laser light shows that are, amazing fireworks shows where they literally have what looks like an actual whale going through the air in China in their New Year's.
Oh, yeah.
This is the technology that will lead people. You think War of the Worlds was amazing as a radio show? Wait till that happens in the sky, and people will be absolutely convinced that it's real. Of course, there will be, actors, whoever on the ground to make it appear even more real. But that will be accomplished through Project Bluebeam. Now, there are people who will think that the second coming of Christ happens. Remember, when Christ comes again, he's supposed to be everywhere all at once, and everybody's supposed to see him all at once. Well, that's easily accomplished with this sort of technology. And there are a lot of people that are going to worship a false Christ because they are not savvy enough to know that the technology is going to
leave out the fact, too, that if this happens, if something like that was to happen, how many nations with nuclear weapons will launch them? So now we have an environmental issue. If something of Project Bluebeam was to ever actually happen, we will see hysteria on levels in which we never saw society break down.
Wow.
Okay, right, so shout out, one more thing, John, sorry. Shout out to Canadian Prepper, one of my favorite guys on Facebook and on YouTube, Canadian Prepper. He and a couple of other guys have gone through some things which show that, yes, nuclear war is survivable. But then, there's another conspiracy in there about whether or not nuclear bombs can even be detonated, all based on harmonics and sacred geometry. So I'll leave that for another day.
Now we do have, we'd like to bring our audience on.
Oh, Ed's got to say something. Be quiet.
Yeah, hold on. Ed, I'm going to let Ed add the last word here, but let's put on Adams because, conspiracy question is catching on already, George. He says, why do we park on driveways and drive on parkways? So there you go. Now, we got a new thing here.
That's a good one, Adam. That's a good one.
People are gonna do that. So Ed, I'm going to give you the final word, and then we're going to land this balloon, this UFO. I'm sorry, UFO show. So
I'm not sure about UFOs, but I think they've taken Dorn, and we haven't seen Dorn in the chat for a while, and so I'm working on this for next week. Just a heads up, guys. So let Dorn speak. Hashtag let Dorn speak.
Ed, check out down there where it says Jules Winfield. That may or may not be Dorn. I don't know. And I want to know what Jules Winfield means, but it's probably code for something. Who knows? He'll probably come in Lucy's broadcast here in a second. So, George, we've kept you longer than we should, but as always, very good conversation. And go out and get George's stuff on Amazon. And we forgot to even talk about your jazz pianist abilities. Where are you going to be playing next? Maybe somebody come catch you.
I do a lot of private things. I'm doing an 80th birthday party this weekend.
We'll be like birthday crashers, like wedding crashers. We'll just come on in and say, I know the lady, she's 80, right? Yeah, let's go.
There's a place over the summer we do Wednesday jazz called Brown Skin Coffee. So we're looking for that when the good weather breaks.
All right. That sounds like a lot of fun. So, here you go, Ed. Here's your guy. Oh, Jules Winfield didn't post Van Lucy from the show. Well, apparently Adam wasn't on at the start of the show because we have such a thing on here. So, all right, everybody, thanks for being on here, and thanks for legging it through with the TV show and our broadcast and our podcast and all these castings that we're doing. We appreciate all of our viewers. Oh, and we got sort of a new ending too. So it's a little more generic. I know you can't wait. I'm just going to play it. Hey, George, thanks a lot. I'll see everybody else. And then, George, stick around after. We usually do a little decompression here. So here you go. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Yeah!